Hello, my name is Andrea and I am being baptized today. Growing up, I didn't really go to church with my parents. They believed in God, but we weren't really in that environment together. I mainly went to church with my grandma Jan here in Staunton, and I actually got baptized through that church. But that was mainly to go through confirmation. I never felt connected to God. I more so did it because my stepmom asked me if I wanted to, and even though I wasn't pressured from her, I still felt a little pressure to do that. So I did it, and I wanted to also make my grandma proud, that I could say that I went through the confirmation process. Eventually, I stopped going because I just really wasn't getting anything out of it. Later on, I was experiencing lots of loss in my life with losing grandparents and aunts and uncles, and that obviously led to my depression and anxiety in my life. And since I was depressed and I was always anxious, I actually turned to drugs and alcohol because I told myself that that would help make myself better. Anytime I would go to work, and then I would get off work and immediately go smoke. And like that is what I centered my life around. On the weekends, I would say, hey, let's get as drunk as we can. In the moment, I had the relief from the drugs and alcohol, but as soon as I would be sober again, I would realize that it was actually making it worse, but I did not want to admit that because, again, in the moment, I was just like, okay, like I don't have to worry about those feelings anymore. In that time, I was really, really distant from God. There would be some nights where I would be in my room and I would just cry alone, or in the shower I would cry and say, God, if you loved me, then why are you putting me through this pain? I know now that it wasn't his fault and he doesn't want me to hurt, but in those times it was hard for me to be able to trust him because I was placing blame on him. Later on down the road, my dear friend Allie Hughes, you guys might know her as Nurse Allie, she introduced me to Net Community Church. Every time I come to church, I always end up crying, no matter what the message is, because I always feel like Pastor Derek or Pastor David is talking directly to me. And that is what really drew me to this church, because I immediately felt that connection with God while I was here. Then Allie, she pushed me to be in a community group, and I was super nervous because I was like, I don't know anybody at the church. I am fine with coming and sitting next to her, and that's it. So I joined that community group with Trevor, and the first meeting I was nervous, but Trevor, we were having some technical difficulties, so he made the situation, it wasn't so serious. At the end of the 6 weeks, our last class together, I remember telling him, like, Trevor, I don't want this class to end because I'm afraid of falling off. Because church was online at that time due to COVID, so I didn't want to lose that connection because I was there again. I was starting to feel my relationship with God come back together. So he then, his wonderful wife Ashley, he asked me if I wanted her number, and I told him, I was like, well, I don't really like reaching out to people, so he was like, well, that's okay, I'll tell her to reach out to you. Ashley, she talked to me, she kept me grounded, and she really helped me stay connected. Ashley then reached out to Jordan in the church and told her like that I would be a good one to reach out to and ask if I wanted to be a part of the growth group that Jordan was leading. So Jordan friended me on Facebook. She messaged me and she's like, "Hey girl, I heard that you were looking to kind of be involved in a growth group and I wanted to see if you'd be interested." So I read the message and I sat there for a little while saying to myself, like, I didn't know if I wanted to because I knew that would lead to vulnerability in my life, but I had to take that leap of faith, and I told her yes, that I would love to, even though I was very nervous. During that night, we were all going around and we were sharing our testimonies, and it eventually got to me, and I was sharing my background of when I was younger and now, and Ruth Billings, she interrupted me, and she asked me, "Are you saved?" And I was like, yes, definitely. And then I finished like saying what I had to say, and then it moved on to Allie. And I was sitting there and I wasn't really listening to what Allie had to say, because this whole time God was kind of like tapping me on the shoulder and was like, "Andrea, you have not, like, you know, you need to be honest in this moment," because deep down I knew I wasn't, but everybody else was sharing their stories, and it's hard when everybody else was, you know, sharing that moment with me, that I couldn't say that I did have that. So I interrupted and I said, "Hey guys, I don't mean to interrupt." I said, but I really don't think I have. You know, I've been baptized with my brothers, but I'm like, there hasn't been a moment where I can say like, yes, like that is my salvation story. So Ruth asked me a really hard question. She looked me right in the eyes and she was like, "If you were to die right now, would you go to heaven?" And it kind of like, and man, it hit me where it hurt. My chest just dropped to my stomach. And everybody else was like, "Ruth, like, man, like that's a deep question." But in that moment, I needed to be asked that question, because I said no. If I were to die right now, I could not say that I would go to heaven. So she was like, "No, okay, you're not saved." And for weeks, I would always remember that after Derek got done preaching, he would always say, "I know that there's somebody out there that that God is speaking to you to come forward and to be saved." And on the other end of the phone, when we were online, I was like, "Oh, that's me. That's definitely me. Yep, God is talking to me." But I never had the courage to go to Derek and say, "Hey, like, it's my time." And I told the girls that I was feeling that way, and that is when, like, Jordan, I remember her, she stood up off the couch and she was like, do you want to? Like, do you want to right now? And I was kind of hesitant. I was hesitant because like, I was like, oh man, like, just to see like that joy in Jordan's face, like, okay, like, you know, like this could be it. And I was so nervous in that moment, but I said yes. And so I remember Jordan's like, she's like, is it okay if I like come over there? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So she came over, she kneeled next to me, and then all of the other girls, they walked over and they placed their hand on my back, and Jordan prayed over me. And in that moment, I felt such a sense of relief, like I could breathe again. And I remember they were like, all like, "Oh, how do you feel?" And all I could do, I just sat there and I cried, and Jordan gave me the biggest hug. For so long, I was looking for that missing piece in me. in drugs and in alcohol, and I was looking for it in all the wrong places. And that moment that I accepted Jesus into my life, I felt whole. I was like, okay, like, this is it. The reason I took so long to accept Jesus in my life was because I always thought that I had to change things about myself, and that I had to stop doing certain things in my life before I could take that step. So I was just like thinking back and like, everybody keeps telling me that I don't have to be this perfect person to accept Jesus. And once I realized that I didn't have to be perfect for Jesus, that is when I realized that I wanted to take that step in my life. My life since receiving Christ has been an emotional roller coaster, to say the very least. I have experienced some major ups of joy and moments where I'm down on my knees or I'm in my car listening to my Micah Tyler radio and I just start crying because I realize like that God loves me, and no matter what I do in life, like He is always going to be there. And it's overwhelming, but it's overwhelming in the best way possible. But if I'm being completely honest with all of you guys, I deal with condemnation because I always struggle with, like I'm not measuring up. Like I laid down my life for Christ, and I'm still, I am in bad habits of being bitter or being quick to anger, and I am always really hard on myself. But in those moments, I do reach out to Jordan, to Allie Hughes, and to Allie Whitehead. I want to be baptized because I feel like people can relate to my story. How I thought that I had to be this perfect image in God's eyes, and that I had to clean myself up before I could have a relationship with Christ. And I want people to know that that is not the case. He will be there every step of the way to help you turn from your old ways into newness. I would like to thank my dear friend Allie Hughes, aka Nurse Allie, for introducing me to NET and keeping me grounded and pushing me on my hard days to be present. I would like to thank Trevor and Ashley Hogue because both of you have met me with so much grace and all of my questions that I have for you, and letting me know that I'm not alone. I would also like to thank my wonderful friends Jordan and Allie Whitehead because if I'm struggling, I know that I can always go to them. They are ladies where we can laugh and we can joke around and have fun together, but Jesus is always going to be at the center of that relationship, and if we are struggling, we can bring each other back to Him. Derek, thank you. You are a wonderful human being because when you're up there and you're preaching, you make it easier to understand. You also have so much grace in your heart. So I know that even though you intimidate me very much, I know that I can always go to you with any questions that I may have. And I would also like to thank Ailey because even though we haven't had very much interaction, the very small interactions that we have had, you are filled with joy and it just overflows into my cup. And I absolutely adore that about you. So thank you for being a new light in my life.